was that?
Why do I love that so much? Hello and welcome to our 7th episode of the Half-Hour Genius Hour. My name is Darren Akakihara, and I am your EdTech TOSA for the day and rest of the year. And today, we are privileged to have these 3 wonderful educators with us, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a moment. But first, today I want to remind you that we're going to be talking about social science, and we're going to actually distinguish between social studies and social science in just a moment. You're going to be so interested to hear that, I know. And we're going to talk about how to bring that to life in your classroom, because really, it's one of the more exciting subjects that we get to teach, right, in our multiple subject environments, as well as in the secondary situations as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to have MTV. We'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Mary Thomas-Vallens. I teach 5th grade currently at Briarwood School, and I love social science because I've had amazing interactive teachers who've taught me how to teach those things.
Excellent. And we have my counterpart in the educational TOSA position, Miss Jenny Fritz Ritter.
Hi.
Tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay. So I'm Miss Jenny Fritz Ritter. I am an EdTech TOSA this year with Darren and Jennifer and Serena, and it's awesome. And before coming into this role, I taught middle school social studies, and a long, long time ago, 10th grade modern world and economics. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's me.
And Christina.
Hi. I am a K-12 literacy TOSA, content literacy TOSA, but I started off getting my secondary credential in social science, and then I added the secondary credential in English, so I've taught both secondary ELA and social science. Most of my time is spent teaching 7th grade world history and 8th grade U.S. history.
Ooh, wow. You're well-rounded. And so right before we got on the air, I was like, what is the difference between social studies and social science? Because all of a sudden I feel like I'm calling it social science. And so Jenny kind of chimed in and she said, well, go ahead.
Okay. Well, and Christina mentioned that we're talking about the history, social science content standards for the state of California. And what I mentioned is that it's not just a pseudoscience, it's a science in a way where we're looking at people and we're looking at data, like in psychology or sociology, and I think that trickles down into how we look and examine societies.
Yeah. Christine, you want to add to that?
Well, I think it's interesting. The kids, when they get to middle school, they start saying history class. They don't say social studies or social science. You know, they just call it history class. But then when you go to college, it's the school of the humanities or the school of social science. And it's like Jenny said, they'll have sociology, psychology, along with what we would study in a secondary setting. And you're looking at people and geography and how everything interrelates. And it's not, I guess in social studies there's maybe an easier way for kids to understand.
Yeah.
And maybe that works for the little ones.
I wonder why they changed. Interesting. Because doesn't it seem like it just changed overnight?
Mm-hmm.
MTV?
Well, actually, I've heard the battle of those terms for a long, long time, and I think it's to take away from the idea that it's a soft science. So I think it's looking at human behavior and how it affects our lives. It's so multi-dimensional, and it's not just about dead people who did things long ago. And so I think that's what, to me, makes the whole subject exciting. I think social science, or whatever you want to call it, takes a stepchild to everything else in the classroom in elementary a lot of times, because it's one of the things that's not tested. And yet, for me, it could be the heartbeat of the classroom. It can drive the novels that you study. It can affect the discussions you have. And then it's a great vehicle for skits and debates, speaking and listening, writing, studying informational text. But to me, the bottom line is we live in a democracy, and without informed decision-making citizens, I don't think kids are going to be prepared for the future. And case in point, look at the current election. How many people are really thinking critically about the people who are leading and making decisions about our future?
Yeah. So we're doomed to repeat history.
Yeah.
Unless we learn about it, right? Yeah. When I first thought of doing these Genius Hour shows, I approached MTV about doing one, and she's like, I want to talk about social studies, social science. And you were going to talk about how you use current, news and relate that to, what has happened in the past and what you're studying, and how you use that to just bring the classroom alive, right? And that's how we got the actual title for today's show, was from you, MTV.
Wow.
You were the inspiration behind the show. So why don't we start? Let's go back over here to Jenny. And Jenny, can you tell us about some of the just maybe out of the box or not, straight out of the textbook kind of things that you're doing, and the foundation from which you design your lessons?
Okay. I really, really enjoyed, and something that I missed is curriculum design and working backwards from not just essential standards and learnings, but assessment, and then really planning a meaningful unit for my students. All the textbook stuff was done at home as homework, right? I really wanted them to come to class with the input already so we could do those processing activities. I used a lot of TCI, the Teacher Curriculum Institute, as a supplement, and they have simulations, and I could tweak and modify them, whether or not you're acting out with skits or the students are creating their own, debates, discussions, Socratic seminars, just so many things to bring it to life. And for me personally, I loved bringing in art and interpreting art with the students and talking about the purpose of it. And art history is so rich, and you can really see a society and a reflection of its its values and the resources, everything through what they create. So that's fun. I even had a friend, she is in fashion, and she learned her history through the history of fashion. So it's really cool. And so she actually could imagine what people were wearing and the resources they had and what that represented. So whatever it is with the kids at the beginning of the year, I would just say, you know what, history is everything. You may not like history class, but you like video games. There's a history behind that, and gameplay and entertainment and technology. So whatever it is,
so I'm hearing like you and Mary are both connecting student interest with and making that the means for engagement. I love that. I love that. Christina, you have such a hard job, K through 12. How do you approach this? Like, what are you doing right now?
A lot, quite a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Thank you.
You guys are always busy over there.
I think I'm using the way I taught in my classroom, which was, Jenny said it perfectly, not textbook based, but looking at what's essential from this unit, because the textbook has so much information that really isn't essential. It's background, but it's not really essential, and some of it isn't part of the standards. So if you were just looking at which standards you wanted to teach, there's going to be extra information in the textbook that the kids don't even need. It might even confuse them because it's just so much. And I always tried to come from the perspective of, we have a college degree, we have all this background information, movies we've seen, like Jenny said, history is everything. Like, you can draw on books you've read, novels, movies, art, to really get this full picture of history. But for kids coming in the classroom who are young, they're really learning everything, a lot of them for the first time. So I always try to think of, how can I start a unit so it's engaging, it's not, all this information thrown at them too much at once, but how can I make it really feel organic, and so that it relates to them? And a lot of times I would do that through like a very humanities-based approach where, like Mary said, I'm teaching a novel or we're reading something that really lends itself to what we're studying. And what I loved about that is it engaged so many different types of students. So if I had students who really loved science or language arts, if I tied the history with that, then they were engaged with what we were doing. Like Jenny said, like you can look at history of, boys, middle school boys, they like weapons or they like anything, anything like that. then there's always, or the science, the inventions are fascinated by, okay, how did this happen? Architecture is really cool. You can go on history.com and get these really cool CGI videos where they show like the building of the Acropolis or the Colosseum, and it just puts them in the moment, and they really like it. And then the materials we're using there, it's more like you're manipulating in class, kind of like Jenny said, you're reading at home the basic information, not everything in the textbook, but just what they need to come to class so they can talk about something and have a little bit of that knowledge base, but you're still doing direct instruction in the classroom. And then you're doing things where they're manipulating the information, they're playing with it in a more, intellectual sense, and they're really building their own knowledge.
I love that. I always feel like this show is so good for like brand new teachers because it gives them permission to step away from just teaching out of the textbook and then to really explore and bring some really fresh ideas to this because they're excited, right? But they sometimes just need that permission. And I love what you guys are saying right now. So again, this is a live show, and if you have a question, please feel free to go into the comment section down here, and you can ask a question, or you can email me at darren.nakakihara@iusd.org. I got my email open right over here. We are going to go straight into examples that you can use. So, MTV, what grade do you teach again?
I teach 5th grade. So what I try to do you want me to just jump in?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I was trying to think of other grade levels too. So I would just think about what is the heart of what you want to teach. Now, in 5th grade, it goes from Native Americans to Westward Movement. Lots of information. The textbook's really thick. But I really want, and typically the textbook just marches through all these people who come, they set up a colony, they have different reasons, but it's a lot of just words, names, pictures. What I did this year is I set up the First Amendment, gave the kids, we wrote about read about the First Amendment, come up with our basic rights, and now we're looking for the seeds that planted, like where did we get freedom of religion? And now we're building a wall that's a thinking map. Every time they see an example of the seed of freedom of religion in the Constitution, like the Puritans and the Pilgrims that came, then they write it up there. Or examples of self-government, or freedom of speech, or freedom of assembly. Like Anne Hutchinson met in her home to have religious freedom to pray, and they realized that is a group meeting, and the leaders didn't want them to be able to meet. The other thing that I think really, like when we talk about revolution, every single day I bring up the ideas, where is this kind of thing happening today? Where is revolution occurring today? What does it mean? What's it look like? Is it always a battle? Can revolution be change in another way? And just another example, when we were doing the Bill of Rights, I really had the kids look at the issues today that are in the news all the time. Gun control. Why is that such a big deal? What does the Constitution actually say? And so what gets excited, the kids can start bringing in articles about things happening today that relates to what we're talking about. So the two questions is, why is this important? How does this relate? And that becomes the thread of every discussion.
If there's one thing that you can take away from this is that you can hear how Mary is still evolving as an educator, right? She didn't just create something that she really liked and put it in a box and then brings out that box every year in January. She's still evolving as an educator and tweaking things. I love that. This is so inspirational. That's why you're one of my favorites.
Oh. You are so nice. Well, I get bored otherwise, and the kids would get bored.
Yes, exactly. Jenny, can you give us some examples that you have, just some really wonderful things that you've done in your classroom?
Sure. It's hard because you can think about skills, right, or content. And with social studies, science, history, whatever, we can get bogged down in a ton of names, dates, and places, which are not the most memorable pieces. For content, I'm thinking like 6th and 7th grade world history. In ancient China, I would do the acted out, where I would simulate the class each day to be a different philosophy. So my Taoism day, they could sit wherever they wanted, the lights were off, no talking, but they can answer the questions in any way they want. There's no rules in Taoism. And the next day is Confucius, so they're organized in groups by age, and there are strict rules. And then there's my legalism day, where I am a militant leader, and I have a yardstick, and I'm just going around the room and barking orders at them. So it's funny because the kids the next year will come back and say, hey, can you be a legalist? I said, no, what would it really be like to live in a legalist society? And we go into that. My other kind of favorite individual lesson is just in terms of development of government, and we model it. And this is the kids and I modeling it together. We pose the question, what should we listen to today? We're going to listen to music in class, and we're going to use different forms of government to decide. So we start with a monarchy, so I pick a king, and only the king gets to decide. And if the peasants, everybody else in the room doesn't like it, they have to respectfully ask their king, to change the music. And then we go into an oligarchy, so it's a small group, a tyranny, someone takes over, and then finally democracy, and we all vote for what we want to listen to. And we do a representative democracy. So that's fun. Big things are kind of like what Mary and I were talking about a couple weeks ago with the election coming up. Getting the kids to watch the State of the Union and analyze it at home. And that's going to be different for each child in each election year. And my partner, Lynn Stolt, hi Lynn, she did this huge simulation with the election over months and months of time with her 8th grade students, because that's 8th grade U.S. history. And we also did big Renaissance fairs and things like that. So there are a ton of things you can do. It's endless.
Yeah. Christina, what have you seen or what do you remember doing in your room?
Sorry, I lost my internets for a little bit. So
I know, I saw that, but you came right back.
You're right back. I think it's where I am, so hopefully I will be here for a while. So we did quite a bit. We had, I think where I was with the 7th and 8th grade students, we had students try to take responsibility for their own learning, and we started doing more activities where kids got to pick something they were interested in and present it to the rest of the class and work on presentation skills and really get that ownership piece going. So we try to make that more of a regular thread, so it's not just the teacher giving all the information or the textbook giving the information, but making students, as they get older, more responsible and more engaged in presenting material to their classmates. We did quite a few of simulations where students are actively engaging in some type of process that makes them maybe not exactly feel like someone would have felt at the time, but they're in 8th grade with industrialization. We talk about, okay, what are the, if you're really working in a factory at this time, what was that like? What would it feel like to have, to be in a really small room where you can maybe see what you were even doing, and trying to get students to really feel like what would those situations would be like. And we'd bring in a lot of photographs, a lot of primary sources where students could look at them and look at, and they would start asking questions like, oh my gosh, how old is this person who's working? Like, oh, it's, maybe your age. And getting them to really see almost like a humanitarian side and get them more engaged in thinking about, okay, is this right, is this wrong? And using those visuals, the art and the photographs, the primary sources, maybe interviews or quotes, and getting them to think about what life was really like them then, and was that okay, and how is what have we done to make change? I liked what Mary said where she was talking about the Bill of Rights and having kids look for themes. I think that's important to give students something to look for as they're studying. And so we would, if it was in world history, for example, we would look at why do societies rise and fall, and give them an example with Rome, okay, the rise and fall, and they could even ask a question like maybe did Rome really fall, and kind of look at that argument and getting into more of claim and argument standards, because you could make an argument how it fell or what have you. And then going through the rest of the empires in 7th grade, having them just look at why did it rise and why did it fall? And all of those are characteristics that are part of any society. And they start to see trends. They start to see that it's not just a random list of people and events. It's actually, like Jenny said, it's a science.
Yeah. Do you think that we're Rome right now?
That's a 7th grade writing task that we actually asked to write
Is it
about.
really?
And it's hard because it was compare contrast. You're comparing modern day America to ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And then you're also doing persuasive, so pick a side. And it was hard. I mean, I loved seeing and reading the different stances that the kids took. Because we went over 10 theories why Rome fell. This is, I think, pretty common that a lot of us 7th grade teachers do. And you know what? If you look category by category, there are some similarities, but we have differences too. You gotta hope for the best, but expect the worst.
Mary.
I like that Jenny said that there's a lot of skills in that exercise. They have to learn all that information and then compare and contrast it and then write an argument. It's quite a bit.
Yeah.
We use political cartoons too, so there's like another layer of analyzing political cartoons, and that takes so much background information. I had one student, and she said, "Miss Fritz, these cartoons aren't funny." And I had to try to explain to her. I'm like, well, they are funny if you got the background information. And it's hard.
Well, we have our 5th graders create political cartoons from the. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
That's good. Well, no, please continue.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you were going to ask me something a minute ago, Darren. So go ahead.
I was going to ask you how technology has enhanced your social science lessons, because I know, people out there will be so impressed with you, MTV, with what you're doing in your classroom. Can you tell us how technology has enhanced what you're doing?
Okay, now you've set me up as a super techno person, but actually, anyway, well, we've used a lot of Google Classroom to share information. I think one of the things that I'm finding is when kids do any kind of research, they really need to know how to evaluate sources, and I think we're all doing that. So the whole thing of what to believe and who to believe, that relates to current events, that relates to what you read in a history book. And I know this isn't directly related to your technology question, but what I wanted to mention too is, the very first day of school, when I give the kids the history books, I even ask, who decides what information goes in here? Is every person in history recorded here? Who is the person who's, what species are mainly recorded? Male, white men. Why is that? So even in looking at what went on in the colonization or Revolutionary War, I'm having the kids try to find alternative sources online, primary sources, diaries. And, if my class heard this right now, they haven't seen us do this just yet, but as we get toward revolution, they'll be looking for a lot of like slavery ads, different things that will show different contributions. Because we are even using technology, going online and challenging who's posting these pieces of information, but we're also challenging the editor of our textbook. Why did they choose to put this picture here and not this one? And then finally, with the election coming up, one of the things we're going to do with technology, I've done this for years before computers, but we will write to the newspapers all over the country and ask for the day after the election coverage, and we analyze, the papers come in about a month later, we analyze the bias that might be shown on the cover of the newspaper.
That is fantastic.
Well, like the last election when Barack Obama was elected, there were some states, when he was first elected, it was historic. It was the first African-American president. And in some states, the picture of him was smaller than his opponent. And in other states, the picture of him was the full entire cover from top to bottom. But anyway, so there's a lot of ways to use technology, and that's, just a tiny bit of it.
That's so interesting. I have to tell you a story. Last year, I have a friend that lives in England, and she's a teacher. And I said, can you hook me up with a 5th grade level teacher? Because I want to talk to their kid, have my kids talk to their kids about the revolution and how it's taught over there versus over here. And she goes, I finally got in touch with her, and she's like, to be honest with you, we don't really teach that over here.
Well, I have some British textbooks, and it is just a paragraph or a page.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we talked about the Boston Massacre, and there it's not considered the Boston Massacre. It was
Yeah,
the small scuffle where 6 people died. So, and then we look at the newspaper today, and either online or, you know, how is something reported from different points of view. So I think that's another thing, is really getting all the multiple perspectives and knowing that a textbook may only have a small view of something.
Yeah. Christina, can you give some advice to your teachers out there? Because you have the opportunity to go out there and visit, gosh, K through 12, 13 grades you get to go, you know, you're in charge of, and you've visited. Like, give some advice to them.
I think for social science, again, really remembering that for a lot of students, this is, I would just always remember this is the first time they're hearing it. Even if you might have students with great background knowledge, it's really, for a lot of them, the first time, especially if you look at how many, in Irvine, we have so many students who are new to our country. And I was talking with someone, this was years ago when I was teaching 8th grade, she mentioned the West. You know, and if you've grown up in this country, you might have this idea of what the West is, but the West, if you have not grown up in this country, you may not know what a Western is or what Western culture is. So, like, always keep in mind, students need images. They need lots of images. They need video clips to really just imagine what you're talking about, and that really helps make it come alive to them. And then write as much as they can. Not writing for a grade, but just writing as much as they can so they can have their own point of view about something. And it doesn't matter, you know, what it is, as long as they're practicing writing with the social science content.
Thank you. Jenny, piece of advice for somebody that's new to 7th grade social science.
Wow. There are just so many resources and so many standards to hit, so don't feel bogged down. It's okay to spend more time on a substandard than another, so just plan carefully by looking at those essential learnings that you want your kids to have. Integrate tech is such a great, like, kind of low-risk way to get in there. Like Mary said about, I think, multiple perspectives, definitely know, like, if you're talking about the Crusades, you might say a winner and a loser, right, of the crusade, but flip it and see what would the other populations, how would they be affected, and like Christina said, just write all the time. You can do a low risk writing or even just a paragraph, and be really clear with your expectations of your kids. Like, are we comparing and contrasting? Then we need to do that first before we do our persuasive. So plan, and just call anybody and beg, borrow, and steal. That's totally okay.
Yes. MTV.
Yes.
How can somebody be awesome like you?
Oh, God. You know, I think the thing is I think a lot of times we think about covering material, and, you know, people ask me, what do you teach? And I say I teach children, and I think that's important. It's like I want them to be passionate about the topic, so I have to be passionate. Even if I teach something, English teachers forgive me, like grammar, I have to find something that's going to make it interesting. So in social studies, I try to find the unusual or the peculiar, or I'll bring in some artifacts before we start talking about Native Americans. These kids have heard about Native Americans since kindergarten. So why are we talking about them again and again? But I might bring something that will bring up an issue, or something that will create some cognitive dissonance. So for someone new, I think what I would do is, instead of marching through the book, look at the key learnings for each chapter and figure out, how am I going to bring that to life? And I think less is more. Yes, I do go through the textbook in many ways, because kids need that kind of reading and analytical learning, but they also need, it's my job to make it interesting and skip through what's not necessary. I mean, there's a lot in the textbook that can be skipped or highlighted in a much more interesting way with another resource.
You know, the bigger picture of having a show like this is that I want you guys to know that there are teachers across our district that are ready and willing to collaborate with you. So if you can't find somebody at your school site or on your grade team and you're feeling like an island, please reach out to these people. Look at MTV over there. She's ready to help anybody that calls her, right?
Yeah, well, you've got these other resources too. I call on Jenny all the time, and you there, and so
yeah,
it's
right.
the village. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just whenever you feel like you're alone or you're totally overwhelmed, you know, call us. We are there to help you. If you want to integrate some technology, I'm just away, right? MTV.
Christina is off sources too, because digging and doing all that research on your own can be super overwhelming.
Right. Where like Christina probably already has it inside her head, and she could just go, oh yeah, check this.
Yes.
Okay, so my parting words to you today, because we are, can you believe, like, half hour goes by so fast. I say that every week, but really, 30 minutes is, I need to make a genius 2-hour show. We love talking about teaching. We're so passionate about teaching, so I think that's why the show goes by so fast. Okay, next week we have a great show with Mr. Stan Macheski. Finally, they had to postpone. They were supposed to be today, actually, I think. And next week, Stan and Cassie and Chris Linville will be on the show. And we're going to be talking about what we think the future of education will look like. It'll be very interesting to hear what their take is on that. Do you guys have any parting words? Christina, we'll start with you.
If you need any resources, I'm always available.
How about you, Jenny?
Same. Resources, or if you want to techify a lesson that you already have that you like, that's really fun to do. So just call me.
I'm calling you for that.
Yay!
Mary, how about you?
You know what? I had a thought and just went in out of my head. Oh, what did you... Shoot. Oh, I lost it. What was your question?
I was just saying, do you have any parting words for...
I totally lost my idea. I had one and it just disappeared. Just do it. You know, start small. Mm-hmm. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If you ever feel like you don't have time for social studies, make it your reading lesson. You know, make it your writing lesson for the day. Mm-hmm. Turn it around. You know, I wanted to teach text structures, and I realized there was a great compare and contrast lesson that was coming up. So that became reading for the day. So there's a way to get social studies in. Just use it as your subject area for something else.
That's great advice. Great advice. Thank you once again, ladies, for coming on our show this week. I really, really appreciate your time, and I know that everybody watching does as well. Thank you for sharing all of your ideas and your knowledge and your teaching experience, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Bye.